past the clouds, over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star.
Greetings and welcome back. As always, thank you all so much for joining. You know, last week, President Trump called it, quote, potentially one of the greatest days ever in civilization, end quote, as he laid out his administration's 20-point proposal for a comprehensive end to the conflict in Gaza. In statements alongside Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, Trump said, we're beyond very close. So where are we? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. With each show, my guests and I provide insight and analysis into current events and the broader historical context in which most of these events take place. Let me quickly touch on a couple of today's headlines. The New York Times reports Israel marks a somber 2-year milestone in subdued fashion. Israel marked the second anniversary of the Hamas attack that began its longest war in subdued fashion today, with new hopes of ending the conflict, but with 48 Israeli hostages still in captivity and its exhausted military still adding to the death toll of Palestinians and to the destruction of the Gaza Strip. Folks, it's stories like this that are recounted in this manner that contribute to the problem that people have with understanding reality. October 7th, 2023 was not the beginning of the Zionist colony's longest war. Or maybe it depends on who you ask. Because if you ask a Palestinian, they might tell you that it started with the Nakba, or the catastrophe in Arabic, which refers to the mass displacement and dispossession of Palestinians during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, where an estimated 700,000 to 800,000 Palestinians were expelled from their homes or fled in what became the State of Israel. These narratives, these stories are important because the power to define is the power to control. Here's a question. Is Eric Adams' exit a game changer for Mario Cuomo? Well, the data says not so far. There's been little evidence that Mayor Eric Adams' decision to end his reelection bid has had a major effect on Andrew Cuomo's bid to attract donors and or voters. Quote, it's a totally different campaign, end quote, Cuomo said last week. Quote, I have much more of a field operation, much more presence on the ground, much more social media presence than I've had before. And I'm doing much more personal outreach myself, end quote. But so far, there's little evidence that Adams' exit has become a game changer for Cuomo. And time is running short. He trails Mamdani by 20 points in most polls with a month before Election Day. Finally, U.S. launches its 81st airstrike in Somalia this year. AFRICOM said the bombing targeted the ISIS affiliates in Somalia's northeastern Puntland region. My question is the United States bombing an ISIS affiliate that it's worked very, very hard to support. Well, today, the issue before us is the so-called peace talks in Egypt. Last week, again, Trump called it, quote, potentially one of the greatest days ever in civilization, end quote, as he laid out his administration's 20-point proposal for a comprehensive end to the war in Gaza. So the question before us is this a roadmap to peace or a bridge to capitulation and surrender? My guest is a lifelong activist, former Dean of the Africana Studies Department at Ohio University, former director of the King Center in Atlanta, former host of Morning Conversations with Tom Porter on WPFW 89.3 FM in Washington, D.C. He is Brother Tom Porter, as always, man. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Wilbur.
So before we get to the main topic, again, as I mentioned at the top, Israel marks what the New York Times defines as a somber 2-year milestone in subdued fashion. They don't mention how Palestinians feel about this, I guess because they, see October 7th as the beginning of the struggle, and B, they see Hamas as being the instigator of all of this. They say Israel marked the second anniversary of the Hamas attack that began its longest war in subdued fashion. Again, Tom, I think it's stories like this that contribute to a big problem that people have in understanding all of this, because, again, if you ask Palestinians, they'll tell you, well, let's look at the Nakba in 1948 and the Arab-Israeli War, if you want to have an understanding of what started this mess. Tom Porter.
You know, what's very, very interesting, there are no bad Israel stories. I mean, there's never any mention of the Stern Gang. There's never any mention of the Balfour Declaration, which essentially initiated the founding of the state of Israel in Palestine by the British. That was 1917. So the narrative has always been controlled by Israel and those Western powers who support Israel as really a beacon and a wedge against the Arab states who surround Israel. And it's amazing, one, that the Arab states have gone along with this for their own selfish reasons. There's never any mention that Hamas was created by Israel in order to divide the PLO. The PLO is an organization of organizations, the Palestine Liberation Organization. It successfully did that. Mm-hmm. And like the Taliban, I'm trying to think of the organization that was created by the Saudi Arabian guy in Pakistan. They were organized to fight the Russians. Mm-hmm. And when the Russians left, like most people, like Hamas, they wanted a piece of the action. They were armed. They had guns, weapons supplied to them by the West, and they wanted a piece of the action. So they became terrorists. Not really. They're the same people who fought the Russians. Hamas are the same people who fought the other groups in the PLO and divided the PLO. And they lasted for a while as long as they were useful. And when they were no longer useful, they became to blame. And the Palestinian people are suffering for it. None of this stuff ever comes out.
Osama bin Laden started Al-Qaeda. Is that who you're thinking of?
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Osama bin Laden started Al-Qaeda in Pakistan.
And all of the spinoffs, ISIS and all of these other groups that are roaming Africa and Africa in particular were started and initiated by the West, armed by them. Because the West is only concerned about one thing in Africa, not African unity, mm-hmm. not African democracy. They're concerned about one thing, and that is African wealth, period. There's no other reason. So none of this ever comes into the narrative. And as Stokely Carmichael said once in the 60s, that if you can be defined, you can be prescribed. And so that's what we're witnessing right now. Like I said, there are no bad Israeli stories. Who ever heard of the Stern Gang?
Mm-hmm.
There are no bad atrocities on the part of the Israelis. There are no assassinations on the part. Israel has been assassinating Arab leaders, backing the assassination of Arab leaders for a very, very long time. As I mentioned earlier, in the trip that I was on in Syria years ago, in 1983, I met, this was a previous trip, when I was in Palestine, in Lebanon. And I met Yasser Arafat and some other people. I met Abu Jihad, who was a high-ranking Palestinian official, PLO official. He was assassinated along with other people. So the assassination as a weapon of the Israelis and of the West, period. I mean, if we look at the line of, or the list of assassinations on the part of the West, and Israel is included in the West, we're talking about Amilcar Cabral, we're talking about Eduardo Mondlane, we're talking about Dr. King, we're talking about Malcolm X, we're talking about Ben Barker. I mean, off the top of my head, I can't remember all of them because there are too many to list. Anyway, like I said, there are no bad Israeli stories. There are no bad Israeli stories. Why not begin in 1917 when there was only a small Jewish settlement in what is now called Palestine?
Mm-hmm.
And it was the Balfour Declaration which initiated that in order to get support from the European Jews for World War I. So this didn't just start.
You mentioned Jewish stories. The one just popped in my head. Rahm Emanuel's father. Rahm Emanuel, of course, I think was Clinton's former chief of staff, former mayor of Chicago. His father was a member of the Irgun. And, how many people have ever heard about the Irgun and know what, talk about terrorist organizations.
Right.
So in fact, staying on this point about the narrative, here's some video of Van Jones a day or two ago with Bill Maher. And this is, I'll be kind and say nonsensical. Let's see if we can go ahead and see if we have this video to roll. There may be a delay in getting this video up. So while we're doing that, let me go back to just let me know, send me a message, let me know when the video is ready to go. So in December of '83, Reverend Jesse Jackson traveled to Syria with a delegation to negotiate the release of a captured U.S. Navy pilot, Lieutenant Robert Goodman. You, Tom, were part of that delegation. As you listen to the Trump-Netanyahu jingoistic rhetoric, when you look at the so-called negotiating style of the U.S., can you do any compare and contrast between what you experienced then in '83 with Reverend Jackson in Syria and what you're seeing and what you're hearing now?
Well, it was a different time,
mm-hmm.
and a different political climate. We certainly were not in the midst of a fascist government. And it was in the context of the 1984 presidential election. Jesse Jackson was a candidate with his Rainbow Coalition. And at that time in 1983, 84, I was a chief strategist and really chief staff in the campaign. And there are a lot of stories about the campaign. The only true story or book written about the trip to Syria is The Road to Damascus, written by Wyatt T. Walker, who was on the trip as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that, if you want to get some idea of my role and in the campaign and on that trip to Syria, be that as may, Lieutenant Goodman and another pilot, Lieutenant Goodman was black, the other pilot was white. They were shot down over Syria. And I can remember there is a picture of myself and Reverend Jackson on the plane, and Reverend Jackson is reading the New York Times, which I just handed to him. And one of the lead story was that the pilots had been shot down over Syria. And Reverend Jackson said, we ought to go in there and get that boy. And I'm saying, what's Reverend talking about? And we were on our way. We were on a trip with the other presidential candidates. We were on our way to New Mexico. And Reverend Jackson mentioned it to me again. He said, because he had asked me to send word to Frank Watkins, who was a staff member based in Chicago and been very close, about going to Syria and getting that boy. And he asked me if I'd sent it. Actually, I hadn't. And so when the plane landed, I excused myself from the hotel room and went downstairs and called Frank Watkins up. And I said, Reverend Jackson's saying that we should go in there and get that boy. And that's how it began. And at that time, myself and Florence Tate, who was the press secretary, we were what was called the road team. We were traveling around the country. And I might also mention, because I think this is very important in understanding Jesse Jackson's campaign and the relationship between certain segments of the Jewish community, the Zionist Jews. Jesse's conflict didn't begin with his using the word Jaime in referring to New York. It began when he announced that he was running in the DC Convention Center, and the Jewish Defense League interrupted his announcement. And from then on, everywhere we went, the JDL was harassing us. And this was before Reverend Jackson got Secret Service protection. And so we had no security protection. And Minister Louis Farrakhan volunteered the Fruit of Islam to provide security for us. And that was the only reason why the JDL backed off. So from the very, very beginning, they had a problem with Jesse Jackson. And the problem was his positive position on the Palestinians and the fact that they had a right to have a homeland too. And that, which is something that very few members of the Jewish community support. So anyway, we finally got invited to come to Syria. Now, the other thing you have to understand, Ronald Reagan, who was the president then, he was saying that if we went to Syria, we would be interfering with U.S. foreign policy. Talking about a narrative, the day before we left, we were meeting in the office of Lawrence Eagleburger, who was the Undersecretary of State. So much for us interfering with U.S. foreign policy.
Well, and that really highlights what I was trying to get to with my question, and that is because I've heard you recount that story a few times, and so there was the dominant narrative for domestic consumption,
right?
And there was the real work that was being done behind the scenes from a diplomatic perspective. That behind the scenes diplomacy process really seems to be non-existent now. Whether we're talking about the conflict, the military intervention of Russia in Ukraine, whether we're talking about what's going on. I mean, Donald Trump says publicly to Hamas, you're about to get obliterated, as they're supposed to be going in for negotiations. That's really what I was trying to get to in terms.
What we have is two leaders, so-called leaders, one playing good cop, the other one playing bad cop.
And they're both bad cops.
Which has been, they're both bad cops. I mean, how can you say that you want peace when you've been funding the war machine of Israel all along? How can you say that you want peace? How can Netanyahu, who says that he's avenging the attack on October the 2nd to the tune of thousands and thousands of people, women and children, and starving them, and then want to stand up and say that it's worse than the Holocaust, when in fact he is committing crimes, and the United States is complicit in the deaths of all of those women and children, and they're complicit in the deaths of the people of Sudan. It was they who organized and instigated the division of Sudan, and so it's what the narrative that we're getting in this country is, quite frankly, the narrative that most people want in this country, because they don't really want to take a stand. They don't want to take a stand against Israel. They don't want to take a stand against certain segments of the Jewish community, even though these communities take a stand against us. They took a stand against Malcolm, took a stand against Dr. King. So we have this, but we're in a different. Ronald Reagan knew in '83 that he had a political problem. He had no relationship with Syria, and so therefore he had two choices. He could attack Syria, which was not a good decision, or he could negotiate, but he had no negotiating position. And so Reverend Jackson's was real useful. Mm-hmm. As both a mediator and the possibility of being able to accomplish the release of Lieutenant Goodman, because everybody wants the support of the Black American community. Everybody wants, but the Arab wants, and they all want, because we are potentially the Achilles tendon of the United States as a result of the enslavement and the continuation of various forms of oppression and racism and discrimination. And we have demonstrated that we will fight. And so, and that was a time in '83 when the Black community still had some energy and still had some leaders. And so Jesse Jackson's was very useful. As a matter of fact, fast forward when Lieutenant Goodman was released, Reverend Jackson his first call was to Ronald Reagan. Now, I can't tell you what Reagan said to Jesse, but I can tell you what Jesse said to him. And but there is no, the only people who could mediate, honestly, would be the European Union, but they're not about to do it. Mm-hmm. And so what we have are two people who agreed from the very, very beginning in their own interest that the destruction of Palestine and Gaza was in the interest of Trump financially and from a standpoint of real estate, and Netanyahu, for the same reason, slightly different, his notion of greater Israel, to control all of that. So and Hamas right now is probably pretty much decimated as an organization. Leaders have been assassinated and what have you. The problem that they have, quite frankly, is the long memory of the Palestinians who've witnessed this. And whereas I don't think revolution is the indiscriminate killing of people, such as took place in London. But I also can predict that more and more of that will happen, because the memory of people is very, very long. The memory of children being killed, wives being killed, and what have you, that's not going to go away, whatever they decide in Egypt. That's not going to go away.
Let's see if we can roll this video now, talking about the narrative and Van Jones on
This is about Iran. Iran and Qatar have come up with a disinformation campaign that they are running through TikTok and Instagram that is massive. If you are a young person, you open up your phone and all you see is dead Gaza baby, dead Gaza baby, dead Gaza baby, right. Diddy, dead Gaza baby, dead Gaza baby. Like, that's basically your whole feed. So that's not DEI. That is a geopolitical adversary that is deliberately trying to divide the West against itself.
That view is not, but the idea that, I mean, you're talking about young people, a lot of them seem to know one thing. White people did some very bad things in this world, and they certainly did. But there are other things to know.
Yes.
Including
the fact that in Sudan right now, which nobody is talking about, you have Arab militia murdering people by the wheelbarrow, including the fact that Africa right now is being overrun by Islamist terrorists, including Boko Haram, with no conversation about that at all.
I did it last week.
Exactly.
Nigeria.
Yeah, Nigeria.
I mean, this is an actual planned genocide.
Yes.
I mean, they really want to kill all the Christians in that country, and they are systematically doing it.
And the fact that there's almost no response from the global left and no attention from...
Bill Maher says, this is actually a planned genocide, talking about what's going on in Nigeria, as though what's happening in Palestine is not. And did Van Jones provide any analysis, or did he just read the New York Times 20 minutes before that interview started and was just spewing ridiculous? This is a campaign started by Iran and TikTok. That's sheer idiocy.
Well, I mean, Van Jones, like so many people, like the congressman who took money from AIPAC.
Which one? Meeks?
There was a bunch of them. And it's how we avoid being critical of Israel or Zionism without incurring the wrath of AIPAC and the various organizations. I mean, we saw how they were able to defeat the congressman from New York and another congresswoman from St. Louis who, Corey, what's her last name?
Bush,
who's running again. And so Van Jones, and in the position, he pretends to be a socialist. He pretends to be a lot of things, but basically he's one of the chosen ones. I mean, I always wonder where these people come from. All of a sudden, there's this person named Van Jones, and he's got green lights. He's all over CNN, MSNBC, everywhere, you know, and he becomes a spokesman. And you wonder, where does he come from? And he's used, and then when he was no longer useful, they booted him. So what they do is they spend the rest of their career trying to find a choice part on the backside of the Jewish community to atone for what certain segments of the Jewish community have said, or the white community said, was a sin. And so then he comes up with this, Since when does Iran and Qatar have access to Western media? I mean, give me a break. I mean, Trump just said that the Iranians couldn't shop at Costco. And you think they got access to the New York Times and the LA Times and the Wall Street Journal or Facebook? Get out of here. He's just trying to get his meal ticket back. He threw in Diddy for comic relief.
So going back to the point, so this is supposed to be a negotiation. And Trump comes on CNN and says Hamas faces, quote, complete obliteration, end quote, if they refuse to secede power and control Gaza. Amid, as they say, his push to propose a ceasefire plan. How, understanding the history here, how can anybody trust Israel when Israel just assassinated Hamas leaders in Qatar who were there working on a peace negotiation? The United States assassinated General Qasem Soleimani. He was in Iraq working on a peace proposal, on a peace mission on behalf of the United States, trying to bring rapprochement between the Saudis and Iran. Those are just two examples. How can, and of course, you've got the Balfour Agreement, which they violated as soon as the ink on the thing was dry back in 1914. How can, what is Hamas doing now? Who do they trust? How do they trust? What do they trust?
Well, they can't trust any of the actors. I mean, why is Trump's son-in-law there? I mean, what's he bringing to the table? I mean, what's Egypt bringing to the table? There plenty of times Egypt could have, as a matter of fact, provided aid to the Palestinians. They could have opened up
the border.
They could have done a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The Saudis and the rest of them, they wouldn't even have to fire a shot. They could simply quit doing business with Israel. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that they could have done. But so Hamas not only can't trust anybody, but everybody knows of the basis of the foundation of Hamas and why many of the Arab states supported the division of the Palestinians. Quiet as it's kept, as they say, as hush as it's spoken, the Palestinians are the most intelligent, most advanced thinkers among the Arabs. And that's been a well-known fact.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of fear of the Palestinians among the Arab states. And so, I mean, it's a no-brainer to say, well, Hamas can't be involved and it is, they got to get out of it, blah, 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 blah. That's easy to say. Everybody wants that. Maybe even Hamas at this point. They just want to get out with dignity. So they have, Hamas doesn't have, but the larger issue is what happens to the Palestinian people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Israel is still bombing Gaza City as they're talking.
Right.
Israel, Netanyahu, they say one man, but it's never one person. It ain't just Trump.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everybody want to say it's Trump, but it's people who are also following him and are co-signing this madness. Netanyahu does not want an end to the war. And Trump is only pushing the end because it's embarrassing. He alone of the Western powers is still at least verbally supporting Israel. and he's doing the same thing what Israel is doing with Russia. If you don't do so and so, we gonna do what? We ain't gonna do nothing because you don't really have any options. You don't have any options to stop Putin, and Putin ain't listening to you.
But you're not saying anything.
And Netanyahu's not listening to you. You said to cease, and he loaded up his guns again.
All in hopes of a Nobel Prize, which they're announcing this week. And man, if they were to go with Trump on this one, they would forever lose any credibility.
Of course, and I mean, so many institutions, the Supreme Court, no credibility.
Right.
The Congress, the Senate, no credibility. The Democrats, the Republicans, no credibility. Even if you receive rewards from a crooked Supreme Court, you know that it's crooked.
Mm-hmm.
You know that what you got, you didn't deserve, but you got it because you bought the Supreme Court. And so who believes the Supreme Court? I mean,
47%. The last number I saw was 47% of Americans believe that they've gone way too far. They're way too conservative. And to your point, it's been stacked for a particular reason.
And so you can't win when you stack the deck like this. So you're right. If they should award the Nobel Peace Prize to Trump, it will not mean anything.
Except to him, because shiny baubles, he's like a 7-year-old or a puppy. Shiny baubles get his attention.
Oh, yes. Yes. And of course, everything he does is great.
Mm-hmm.
Everything he does is the greatest thing that's ever been done.
In civilization, in the history of civilization.
Civilization, yeah. I mean, you talking about he's not going to be happy until he gets a war. He's trying hard in Venezuela. I mean, how can you seriously consider giving him a Nobel Peace Prize? And how could he even believe just killing innocent people in the Caribbean in boats who you don't know what they're doing, and you ordering the murder and assassination of people, and you should be given a Nobel Peace Prize? You were sending the military, the National Guard, to attack your own citizens, and you should be given a Nobel Peace Prize. But he actually believes in his mind of minds, if he has one, that he should get one.
To your point, Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary, says that Chicago is a war zone after federal agents shoot a woman sitting in her car. And one of the interesting dynamics here is she calls it a war zone, but who started the war? Who started the conflict with the National Guard and the Marines in Los Angeles? Trump did by sending them there. We didn't have, thank God, didn't have this conflict in DC, but it's now manifesting itself in Chicago as ICE agents and FBI agents are rappelling onto roofs from Black Hawk helicopters. A lot of folks are focused on what Trump said last week at his speech, talking about using American cities as training grounds. But again, he started that with Los Angeles because folks forget he sent Marines, 700, I think, Marines into Los Angeles. Tom Porter.
I mean, like I said, he's got an itchy trigger finger. I think that they ought to have somebody on watch 24/7 in the White House so that he doesn't sneak downstairs and push the button. I mean, we're talking about, I'm not using this word lightly, we're talking about a maniac.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about a very, very dangerous human being, you know. And he's not only declared war on the American people, but I would submit to him that if he really wants to get, why doesn't he? The Africans would be glad for you to get rid of ISIS and all those people who are running around the desert and their countries in American or European-made Jeeps with European-made weapons, terrorizing, kidnapping women and children, raping women and girls. I mean, they would be glad if you why don't you send somebody in to deal with that? I don't think that any of the American soldiers have the stomach for that. So white people have a real problem in America. Black people have another problem. White people have to deal with the monster that they've created and continue to support.
Mm-hmm.
Black people have to make a decision whether or not they as a people have a future as long as the American political, social, cultural order, economic order remains the same. And that's a serious question, which I think we have to discuss among ourselves. There may not be a future for America as we know it.
Mm-hmm.
It is not progressing in the way even that Trump wants it to progress. And the more he loses and the more the United States loses internationally, economically, the tariffs really aren't working. He's having to renegotiate all of the tariffs because one is people not going to allow their countries to be plundered. So that's not working. The deficit is increasing, not decreasing. And so this whole attack on DEI and the reduction of government is taking money from the only place, the easiest place that he can take money from, and that's from the American people. So this threatening to fire people, that's just another way in which he can come up with some quantitative analysis that says that the deficit is reducing when in fact it's increasing.
And I mention these two books all the time when we get to these points of conversations. Samuel Yates, The Choice, where he talks about African Americans have become obsolete people, and Wilhelm's book,
Who Needs the Negro?
Who Needs the Negro? And ironically, those two books were written right around the same time, within a couple of years of each other, in the 70s, and they hit on very, very similar themes. We have become what does Mr. Yates say? All of the shoes have been shined, all the dishes have been put away, and so now, what are we to do, and what is to be done with us?
But it's actually gone beyond that,
mm-hmm.
because they are predicting with AI, and there's a good article in the Financial Times. I'm trying to think of the name of it. It was 2 weeks ago, the weekend. I would encourage people, if you don't read any newspaper, get the weekend Financial Times.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth reading. But large numbers of whites are obsolete,
mm-hmm.
are becoming obsolete, and or they predict that. And so it's not just Black people, the certain segments of the Latino community finding out the hard way. They thought that they could play the political game and go with Trump, and they did, and he's rewarded them with
deportation.
So America is at a crossroads.
So to that point, when we look at what went down in Los Angeles, when we look at what's going on in Chicago, and of course he's threatened Oakland, and he's threatened another, is this really just the trial run in anticipation of white America turning on him as they go to find out, as they say, well, we didn't vote for this, but what that really means is, hang on a minute, you weren't supposed to screw me. So now these white militias, there are more guns in America than there are citizens, that they're really just using the black community as the test bed as they prepare for a Shays Rebellion of 1873 or 74, when the white farmers went to the armory and stole the weapons and stormed the courthouse so that their land could not be foreclosed on.
Oh well, certainly in the Project 2025 and so Steve Bannon's in the world, they see a white supremacist world in Europe, and in fact, the article that I'm talking about was an article about how the technocrats are uniting with the right wing around the world. That was in the Financial Times. And but I think his miscalculation is wrong. I think that black people are going to fight one way or the other. Black people are not going to go down without a fight. They never have and they never will. So I think that he thinks that by moving into these cities where they have large black populations and black mayors and what have you, he can accomplish a political victory by defeating and getting rid of the black leaders. I don't think that's going to happen. And two is he can establish what he wants to, that is a white supremacist state. Now, what's really interesting about Trump, I don't think Trump has as much of a stake in white supremacy as he has in wealth and power, which are different things. And I mean, Jared Kushner, is that his name, his son-in-law?
Yes.
That he's not there to negotiate with Israel, for Israel, even though he's Jewish, or against Hamas, the Palestinian. He's there to negotiation for a land grab. He wants to come out of it with a land deal. And so, but I think that like I say, Trump is he's mad with the desire to have power. I mean, the language that he uses, is that doesn't make any sense, and it's unbecoming the president of a so-called rational country. But yeah, I think that he wants a war. I think he wants to not be president, but I think he doesn't even want to be king. I think he wants to be emperor. And I don't think that's going to happen, because more and more his base is beginning to see that, look, it's all right. It was okay if you were talking about black folks,
right,
Latinos, but our healthcare is going out the window.
Exactly. Is the piece that you were mentioning in the Financial Times, how tech lords and populists change the rules of power? Was that the article?
No, that's not the article.
Okay.
But it's a similar.
Okay. And to your point about questioning his mental health, there's a piece at MSN, Trump's mental fitness under scanner. Why did a neuropsychologist ask the U.S. president to take an Alzheimer's test? U.S. President Trump, in his second tenure, has become a subject of public scrutiny. Not only his controversial statements, but now his cognitive health is also gaining wide-scale attention. I think that's a very nice way of saying the emperor has no clothes.
Hey, man, as Bobby Dylan says, you don't have to be a weatherman to tell which way the wind is blowing. And the wind is blowing straight through that brother's head.
So final question for you, to that these demands that the United States is making on Iran. Many are concerned that these threats about if you restart your nuclear program, these things are going to happen, that we're really closer to another attack on Iran, which would result in a war with Iran. And that would be a catastrophic error. Tom Porter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how. I mean, it's one thing to drop bombs from above. You can't destroy Iran from above. The question is, are you going to put boots on the ground? And I don't actually think that Trump thinks things through. I don't think things are coordinated between he and the generals, but it would be a catastrophe. And this notion that only European powers can have nuclear weapons is obsolete anyhow. Pakistan has them, India has them, China has them, North Korea has them. So it's obsolete. So why pick on Iran? Iran, again, is a threat because of the level of intelligence of the Iranian people, the capability of the Iranian people, just like and so but I think that he may bomb Iran from above again because he is anxious, in my mind, to show that he has power, when in fact he does not.
The point you're making about boots on the ground, you remember this like I remember this. Minister Farrakhan speaking first at the National Press Club and then at the Howard Inn, talking to the black press right before George Bush went into Iraq, and he said, "You can't win this with your technology." He said, you've got this for the first week or two. He said, but after that, you've got to send your soldiers in here. And when you do, they got something for you. That was, man, 30 years ago.
Well, you absolutely, but I don't think he's thought any of this stuff. I don't think he's a very intelligent human being. I don't think and the stuff that he says, more and more simply does not make any sense. It's just full of superlatives and I am the greatest. It's the greatest thing that happened on the planet, blah, 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 And in many cases, what he's saying has absolutely nothing to do with the subject that he's supposed to be talking about.
Oh, man, that I won't even call it a speech. That diatribe that he went on last Tuesday at Quantico made no sense. It was just stream of consciousness from an unconscious person.
Yeah. Well, the American people, the so-called American people, white people, got a real decision to make. Black people have a decision to make too, but it's a different decision.
Tom Porter, as always, my brother, thank you so much for your time today. Greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate that analysis. And as always, man, look forward to having you back.
Before I go, I wish we'd have talked a little bit about Jay Jones.
Oh, well, go ahead.
Well, this brother obviously said some things that were not nice.
Well, wait a minute. So people know Jay Jones is
running for attorney
general of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and he now he's up in the polls and running against Miaris, who's the incumbent attorney general in Virginia, and he made some very disparaging and threatening. They were hyperbolic comments about someone about 5 or 6 years ago, about bullets and he'd like to shoot them and they're as bad as Hitler. It was more hyperbole than anything. But anyway, go ahead, Tom.
Anyway, all of a sudden from Trump on down, they're saying that he should step out of the race.
Right.
Now here you have a president who's openly been involved in the assassination and murder of people and have bragged about it.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about Venezuela.
Venezuela, and have bragged about, have threatened the lives of other people, including Hamas, and we just in a big stadium celebrated the life of a man who was assassinated by a member of his own group, really. Mm-hmm. We had a big homegoing service for him in a stadium, and he had basically condoned the deaths of people as so that others might live.
And so that sometimes you've got to have a few shootings so that you can sustain the Second Amendment to protect your God-given rights.
And we've elected a president who's been found guilty of sexual misconduct twice. And all of a sudden, and even the Democrats are saying that, Bill Clinton? Huh?
And you didn't mention Jeffrey Epstein.
Epstein,
their relationship with a sexual predator.
And all I can say to the brother Jay Jones is, as my father would say, I'm standing pat, win, lose, or draw. But it's amazing how all of these hypocrites can come out of the woodwork, including the Democrats. They didn't ask Bill Clinton to leave.
Right.
Wilbur, what was his name? Wilbur got caught doing something. I mean, it's just amazing. And we ought to understand the nature of politics. If we don't understand one thing, how come everybody in politics, how come Nancy Pelosi and everybody's rich? They're all rich and claim to be champions of the poor.
Operating within the mousetrap.
They did the same thing with the brother who was running for lieutenant governor.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
They brought a woman out who since disappeared. They did the same thing to Vince Gray here in D.C. Obama appointed an attorney who came in, did all this stuff. They eventually dropped the charges and he disappeared again. These people always come and disappear. It is so. This woman has come out of nowhere and she'll disappear. Whatever happens in this, we won't hear anything about her again.
Well, in fact, that was, as we wrap this up, that was one of the questions that I had, because Jay Jones obviously sent these text messages to someone that he trusted. So, I mean, because they were horrific messages. There's no question about that. He sent them to a woman that he trusted. So I'm trying to figure out what happened with their relationship to where she apparently flipped on him and gave these messages to the opponent. What happened with that relationship?
Well, Ishmael Reed has a poem called Judas. He said, Judas, you got to be careful who you go bar hopping with.
Tom Porter, as always, the pearls come from many strands. My brother, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You can use that, by the way.
Okay. Have a good day.
You too, man. Thanks, Tom. Thank you. Folks, I want to thank Tom Porter, as always, for joining me today. Thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. New episode tomorrow. Laith Marouf will join us tomorrow from Beirut so we can get another perspective on these so-called peace negotiations. Please follow, subscribe, leave a review, share the show, follow us on social media. All the links are below in the show description. And remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See y'all tomorrow. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a wonderful, blessed remainder of your day. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.